Do you really hate math? Or do you just hate how math is taught?
Welcome to the Hack Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Barnes, providing right now solutions to some of your biggest teaching and learning problems. Now, let's hack learning. My middle school aged children ask the questions, and we're going to have author and math guru Gerald Aungst answer them today. Gerald has done a lot for me over the years, and I appreciate all of his contributions. He's written on Brilliant or Insane, and he has contributed in a lot of ways to Facebook groups, to Twitter conversations, a math teacher extraordinaire, and someone who convinced me some time ago that people who claim to not love math, or to, let's say, hate math, maybe don't always hate math. Maybe they just haven't been taught the right way. Gerald brings out a lot of this in his book, 5 Principles of the Modern Mathematics Classroom, Creating a Culture of Innovative Thinking. And I am very proud to say that I wrote the foreword for that great book. And again, that sort of came out of this conversation Gerald and I had years ago about people who hate math, and me saying, oh, I hate math. And he said, maybe not. Along those lines, we are hacking math instruction. We're talking about reluctant math learners, and Gerald's going to pull a little bit of those concepts from his book and talk about that problem and how we can hack it. And as always, we will leave you with some practical, right-now solutions for improving math instruction for the reluctant math learner. Gerald, welcome to the Hack Learning Podcast. Thanks for joining us. And just open by telling us a little bit about what's going on with you these days.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to share with you and your audience. I just finished a 7-year stint as a district-level administrator supervising a gifted program in elementary mathematics for a school district outside of Philadelphia. And as of right now, in the fall, I'm going to be transitioning back into a classroom teaching position, teaching gifted learners and certainly working with math and supporting teachers there.
That sounds great, Gerald, but let me tell you, you know me as someone who proclaims, or at least used to proclaim, that I hate math. Let's talk about that, because in your book, 5 Principles of the Modern Mathematics Classroom, you outline those principles of modern math. And for someone who is the reluctant math learner, or someone who says point blank, I hate math, give us some of the principles of modern math that might make someone say, maybe math isn't so bad.
I talk about these 5 principles that teachers can bring into the way they design their classroom and the way they design their curriculum and instruction that really create an environment and a culture in the classroom that nurtures that way of thinking about problem solving. So it's the idea of just getting kids to ask a lot of questions, that principle of conjecture, just getting them to wonder. And we want to nurture that in the math classroom. We want kids to be asking a lot of questions and then seeking those answers.
You know, I love that idea of conjecture and getting kids to question. You know, for me, when I was in school many, many years ago, back in the dinosaur age, when I was in school and hating math, I didn't have too many questions. What I had more of was, I want to get out of here. You know, I don't see the value. So getting kids to question sounds like a hack and a good one for math. Getting them to ask the questions about it. I like that, but how can we do it? How do I get those kids to ask the questions if they already don't like math?
So one of the things that I like to do is I set up situations where something doesn't make sense or something is just not immediately obvious. And I give kids a chance to just kind of mess around with it for a while. I put them into the situation, give them a problem, and just let them immerse themselves in that. A lot of times kids that are used to traditional classroom instruction will look at something and say, I don't know how to solve this, tell me how to solve it. So the teacher's job really there is to get them to start picking it apart and thinking about, well, what can you figure out? What can you notice here? And once kids get really immersed into that problem, then they really want to get to, okay, now I want to know how to figure this out. And a lot of times they will make a huge amount of progress on their own without any teacher intervention. They can often make a lot of progress on their own if you just let them kind of do that productive struggling.
Yeah, that's a great one. I know that my son, who actually enjoys math, he came home from school one day, and I want to say he was in 3rd or 4th grade, and he was talking about learning area. As much as he likes math, he didn't really like this or get this concept, and he hit me with what I used to say. He said, I just don't see why this is valuable. I don't know how I would use this in real life. And I thought it was very astute for a child of his age to be talking about real life. You know, we love to say that we need to make real-world connections. And, for me, certainly not being a math guy, I thought, well, where would you use this? And we were in a room, and I said, well, who might use this? Tell me what it is. And he got that. He understood how to do it. But again, it was that real-world connection. And we ultimately got to, what if I was somebody who was doing carpet, or I had to put new carpet in a room? I might have to use that formula to figure it out. And you could almost see that light bulb go off over his head. So can you expand on an example like that, Gerald? What else could we do in a classroom where a kid might normally, especially a reluctant learner, might say, I don't see any value in this at all. When will I ever use this in the real world? Give us one of those examples and how we could get kids excited about it.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example from something that I've been teaching actually for the last couple of weeks. I'm working in a summer program, teaching a class right now. On the first day of the class, I showed them a video from Mythbusters where they tested a myth about if you wrapped yourself in bubble wrap and jumped off the roof of the building, could you survive? And I showed them a clip from this episode, and I told them this is what we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks in this class. We're going to, and they all perked up. It was like, okay, are we going to get to jump off the building at the end? And I said, safety rules and all of that stuff. So instead of throwing somebody off of a building in bubble wrap, we're going to see if we can drop an egg off a building and have it survive at the bottom of the fall. And so over the course of these 3 weeks, we've been really kind of exploring a lot of different things about how you use math to model what's going on when you drop an object. How does math help you figure out a way to protect that egg so that it doesn't break at the bottom of the fall? How do you absorb the energy and all of that stuff? And because I created this really intriguing situation where they wanted to know how to do this, the times when it was necessary for me to give them, an equation for something, we can't always take the time to have students, discover it on their own or derive it themselves. But the times when I do have to just hand them an equation, they know why it matters, and they have context now for here's where this fits in. And here's how this is a mathematical way of describing what we were just doing and talking about in the real world.
And I think it's the innovative activities like that are what grab kids. It feels like at this point in the Hack Learning Podcast, we've been sort of in this innovation lane. I had Don Wettrick on, who's one of the big innovation names in education and authored Pure Genius. And I had Dawn Casey Rowe on, and she's another one who's all about, we talked about destandardizing the classroom. And she talked about this kind of work, doing these things that she used that phrase, dig in. It helps kids dig into something that they might not ordinarily enjoy. And that's what I'm hearing in your example. So I like to think that Hack Learning books are really for any educator. We just did Hacking Leadership not long ago, and it's got leaders really excited about being innovative. But we're also going to explore new teachers a little bit and how to help the new teacher because they're faced with so many struggles. And this is a great opportunity for us also to talk about that, what you can do tomorrow practice. So let's say that I'm maybe not brand new, but I'm a new-ish teacher, and I'm a math teacher, and I'm heading into a new school year, and I've seen my class list, and as new or newer teachers often do, they get the kids who are maybe the low level, as we call them, or the reluctant learners. And it's odd that we do it that way, but we tend to stick the newer teachers with the tougher groups.
Yep.
So I'm in that boat, let's say, and I'm going in and I'm thinking, man, I'm already facing kids that have all kinds of out-of-school problems. They maybe don't love school in general, and a lot of them are really going to hate math. And I got to go in and give them these, problems and formulas and whatever other rote memory things maybe. What could I do that would engage these kids? Let's just say day 1 or 2. It's early in the school year, and I want to get these kids to dig in. What can I do?
I would really encourage newer teachers to take some significant time at the beginning of the year and just establish what it means to be a problem solver. Take a couple of weeks and just work with kids about, what does it mean to ask questions? What does it mean to wonder? How do you work together with a partner? How do you communicate mathematically? How do you understand math vocabulary? How do you celebrate the things that are going on in the math classroom? And just take time to establish that culture and that mindset in yourself, but also in your students. And I think if you do that, will go a long way, and you'll end up actually saving a lot of time in the rest of the year.
Right.
So in terms of some specific strategies, I think there's one really powerful strategy that is, when I tell you what it is, you're going to think it's the simplest, most obvious thing in the world, but it really makes a huge difference in the way kids think and the way they respond in the math classroom. Anytime you're asking a straightforward, factual math question, like even as simple as, how many, what's 2 plus 2, right?
Right.
It's got an obvious answer. If you always follow up a student's answer to a question like that with, how do you know that? Or how did you figure that out? Or explain your thinking, or explain your reasoning. If you always follow up their answers with that kind of a question, you're setting up a classroom where you're telling them you expect them to be thinking all the time. And if a student responds with, well, I guessed, that's a perfectly legitimate solution. But you want to start working them towards being able to justify answers, especially when you get into much more complicated kinds of problems. So I think that strategy, something you can start doing day 1. It's something that sets up that expectation of, we're going to be thinkers here, and we're going to be problem solvers here, and I'm never going to be satisfied with just your answer. You're always going to have to explain it to me.
So we're changing the mindset, and we're also going back to what you said earlier about conjecture. We're sort of embedding that in kids right away, that idea that this is a questioning class, that I don't have all the answers as the teacher, or I'm not just the dispenser of information. I love that. And I think that's a really good one for new teachers, too, and really all teachers, to know that we're helping kids to reflect. And I said in a recent episode, I think one of the things that educators in general don't value enough, is this idea of reflection, that if we just stop, or even at the end of class, we stop and say, let's go back and think about what we've done. And that's what I'm hearing from you as well, is to sort of set that mindset early, that everything is followed with a question of, how did you come up with that? Why do you think that way? And I love that you say that the guessing is okay. I think sometimes we're always quick to criticize guessing. Well, if they guess, then that can lead to more conversation, right?
Absolutely. Early in the process of learning how to solve a new kind of problem, guessing really is a big part of the solution, and part of what makes a good teacher is how do you move kids from that initial guessing process to being able to really reason more strategically and more deliberately. But guessing is a perfectly valid strategy early on.
It tells kids, too, I think, that it's okay to fail, that we can say, if we guessed, it's probably because we didn't have an answer, but we didn't say, I'm just going to give up. But we're also sort of telling kids, it's okay to take a shot at something and to be wrong, because that gives us an opportunity to explore what happened there and to ultimately get to the right answer. I don't think we embrace that enough. And I know in my own math experience growing up, when I didn't like math, I did have a lot of fear. There was so much fear embedded in math. I was afraid I was going to get it wrong. I was afraid I was going to look stupid in front of my friends. And I was afraid the teacher might ridicule me and say, well, you guess. You should never guess. Or what's wrong with you,
Yep. And a guess opens up the possibility of saying, okay, how can we find out if that guess is a good one? How can we make a better guess the next time? How can we get better at guessing?
You've given us so much to think about today, Gerald, about math instruction, about kids who may be reluctant toward math, and some practical strategies first for any teacher, but especially new teachers maybe facing reluctant learners, to think about your mindset and to change the mindset going into the classroom, and then to open with questions and to get kids to understand that they're in an environment of reflection and questioning and understanding the path to where the path they're headed down toward finding the answers. So that's fantastic. The book is 5 Principles of Modern Mathematics Classroom, Creating a Culture of Innovative Thinking by Gerald Aungst. And Gerald, tell people where they can connect with you if they had more questions about math.
Absolutely. Well, I am on Twitter at Gerald Aungst, and you can also email me at geraldaungst@gmail.com, and you can reach out through my website, geraldaungst.com.
You know that an expert's willing to communicate when they provide that email. So we'll catch up with you on Twitter. Maybe some people will email you. And I know people want to go out and grab that book, 5 Principles of the Modern Mathematics Classroom by Gerald Aungst. We'll have all of this on our show notes page at hacklearningpodcast.com. Gerald, hopefully we can reconnect down the road and talk a little bit more, because now that I don't hate math, I'm always eager to talk about it. So maybe we can do that again. I really appreciate having you today.
If that's the only thing I've accomplished in my professional life, then I think I've made something good out of it.
All right, Gerald Aungst, thanks for joining us on the Hack Learning Podcast.
Thank you so much.
As always, we continue the conversation at #HackLearning on Twitter and on the show notes page at hacklearningpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.